Talk shoes. Recorded live.
Hello and welcome to the Castle Dracula Podcast. On this podcast, we talk about horror movies, vampire movies, and all-around awesomeness. And this week, we continue our Stephen King retrospective with The Shining, Stanley Kubrick's 1980 masterpiece starring Jack Nicholson. Bear in mind, if you haven't seen today's movie, we're going to be talking about it from the perspective of horror fans who have, so warning, spoilers ahead. I'm your host, Jason Henderson, author of the new Alex Van Helsing adventure, Triumph of Death, in hardback and ebook from HarperCollins. With me are Drew Edwards, creator of the long-running horror webcomic Halloween Man, which you can find each and every week at HalloweenMan.com. Say hello, Drew.
Here's Druzy.
Tony, I lost you for a second there. Tony Salvaggio, creator of the new manga Psycom, Book 3 from Right Stuff and Tokyopop, and lead singer of the band Deserts of Mars, and writer of comics like Psycom from, I said Clockworks and Humanoids. Okay. Say hello, Tony. I botched your intro.
Oh, that's fun. How could I follow Drew anyway? So,
you know what? I blame the editor of my script. So, okay, and I do that myself every week. It's all like red. It's terrible. Okay, and color commentary from the one and only attorney Julia Guzman. Say hello.
Howdy.
Howdy. All right. The Shining, saith Wikipedia, is a 1980 psychological horror film produced and directed by Stanley Kubrick, co-written with novelist Diane Johnson, starring Jack Nicholson, Shelley Duvall, Scatman Crothers, and Danny Lloyd. The film is based on the novel of the same name by Stephen King, and in it, a writer, Jack Torrance, takes a job as an off-season caretaker at an isolated hotel. His young son possesses psychic abilities, or so we may think, and is able to see things from the past and the future, such as the ghosts who inhabit the hotel. And soon after settling in, the family is trapped in the hotel by a snowstorm, and Jack gradually becomes influenced by a supernatural presence. He descends into madness and attempts to murder his wife and son. So, first impressions. I want to hear what you guys think about The Shining. Let's go Julia, Tony, Drew, and then I'll wrap it up. Julia, our non-horror fan who is now in probably her 40th episode of the Castle Dracula Podcast. I don't know if you can be a non-horror fan who's at this point watched 40 movies and talked about them for 90 minutes at a time.
The question is, do I like them or not? That's what makes me a fan or not.
Very good. Okay.
I think that The Shining is probably the second scariest movie I've ever seen, and this is the second time I've seen it. The first time I saw it, I didn't have all the 40 horror movies under my belt, so it was like just terrifying, and like I couldn't sleep for months, and I don't know. But now, having all these horror movies that I've now got kind of jaded and used to watching them, I suppose, I feel like this is still freaking terrifying movie. But there's some stuff that didn't scare me now that had scared me in the past, I think. What makes this movie so terrifying is to me personally, is the acting, which is just, and I think Stanley Kubrick brings that out in the actors with his crazy directing. But the acting, Jack Nicholson just is a terrifying human being. And then Scatman Crothers and the little boy Danny, just their emotional reactions, and to some extent Shelley Duvall as well, but really those two, their reactions to things just are so chilling. And then the music. I think the music just makes it. The rest, the images, of course, everyone has in their memories these images that just say The Shining. We'll talk about those later. But that, I think those are even secondary to the acting and the music for me as far as to what makes this movie just brilliant.
Wow. Okay, outstanding. All right, Tony, give us your opening thoughts, The Shining.
Yeah, it's a fantastic movie. Not the best adaptation. There's a really awesome movie that is here. It's amazing by all counts. It deviates a decent amount from the actual book, and I think that's fine. It's just kind of strange that it's still The Shining, but it's really amazing. And watching it again, I see why. One of the things I want to talk about was, there's so many theories of how, what this the inner meaning of this, documentaries and YouTube videos and everything. And watching it again, you can see why. I mean, everything is so meticulous.
You can go down an endless rabbit hole of YouTube videos about the making of this movie.
Yeah, and it is truly, I don't know. I mean, we got one of the best directors and just a truly stellar cast. It's just awesome. Like, there's so much awesome horror stuff in this.
Where did you first see
another one of those, like, you know, we could go on for several podcasts just about this movie.
Where did you see it first, The Shining?
I think on cable.
Cable?
When I was younger, yeah.
Like the R-rated version, or like a TV edited?
No. Luckily, I never saw a TV edited one that I remember.
Is there one?
Later. I might have maybe have seen one, but I seem to remember the cable one.
I wonder if there is a TV edit.
I don't know.
But you saw it as a kid, probably. Like, how old were you when you saw The Shining?
I don't know. I was older than probably some of my friends, because my parents and grandparents were actually like, you don't need to see that movie, you know. So even though there are other movies I've seen, so I'm not sure how The Shining kind of slipped through, but,
yeah,
you know, I wasn't always a horror fan, so maybe it was a time when I was like, ooh, I don't know, that looks pretty scary, and then that quickly changed. I think in the same.
You know, the kid that was in the movie didn't actually see it until he was 17. The whole movie, like he saw parts of it when he was something like 10 or 12, and then he saw the whole thing. He was 17. He didn't even know he was doing a horror film when he filmed it. He thought he was doing a drama.
That's awesome.
All right, Drew, your first thoughts, and I want to hear both about when you first saw The Shining, and also tell us a little bit about your background with one of the settings of The Shining.
Well, the first time I saw The Shining, I think it was actually, the town I grew up in had a drive-in theater, and sometimes they would second or third run things. So I would imagine this would have been something I would have seen at the drive-in. I know I saw it at one point at the drive-in. And the other option about the first time I seen it would either have been the drive-in or would have been on home video. But I know I was too young to have seen it when it first came out in 1980. But my first impressions. This is first off, Julia. There is no shame in being afraid of this movie. This movie is really, really scary. This is one of the best quote unquote haunted house movies ever made. I mean, it's just slick. There's not really an ounce of fat on this movie. It's just a big, mean monster that just lunges at you. However, something I did notice watching it this time, now that I have read, the novel and, I'm familiar, as an adult, I'm familiar with lots of King's work. This is definitely more a Stanley Kubrick vibe than there's still some Stephen King stuff in there, obviously, because it's based on his work. But this is very sterile. I always feel like Stanley Kubrick's films have this very sort of almost medical. I know that sounds strange, but like you're in an operating room and everything's very stark
and bright.
Yeah.
And this doesn't have like Stephen King. Yes, it's horror, but there's always like this warmth almost, and there's almost always this like humanity, and I don't really feel that with this. And that's actually one of the reasons why it's so scary, is like this movie just wants to terrify the life out of you, and it doesn't really give you that relief because it is such a cynical movie. And so I can't think of like if you probably put more of that Stephen King humanity in it. It unfortunately probably would not be as scary. Strangely,
I think so.
As far as
yeah.
Well, King actually did try that. Go ahead, Drew. Go ahead.
No, and I would like to actually. I never saw the remake. I actually would kind of like to go back and see that now. I kept hearing about how terrible it was, and I'm sure it probably is, but I would like to visit that at some point. But
what I saw wasn't. I don't remember it being good. I mean, there was the stuff that is back from the book, which is kind of cool, like the hedge creatures moving and stuff like that. But it didn't really. It wasn't entirely necessary, considering there is the book and you can read it. You know.
Well, and stuff like that is inevitably going to be scarier when you're reading it than when it's done up as like a CGI special effect. Like, stuff like that is seldom scary when you're actually seeing it and not imagining it.
Right.
But
right. Well, that actually might be one of those things where, first of all, The Shining that came out in 1997, which is a TV miniseries that was produced by Stephen King himself, because he wanted to give it a shot to actually make a straighter adaptation of his book. He did that. And so to the extent that experiment fails, it still is...
I mean, he did a movie before the original Shining came out?
No.
Did a TV thing?
There is the original Shining, the movie came out in 1980.
Yeah, and you said 77, but you meant 97,
97.
right?
Sorry,
Yeah, okay.
I thought I said 97. I apologize. So yes, Stephen King did a television miniseries in 1997 that he produced and wrote himself. And, to the extent that it fails, it at least fails marvelously at what he wanted to do, which is to make his book. And so, and I think it might very well be that since then is when you read more comments from Stephen King where he acknowledges that Stanley Kubrick's Shining is pretty awesome. But actually, I don't want to get totally into that yet, because we'll spend some more time on whether, I want to talk a little bit about the legitimacy of this as a Stephen King adaptation.
Well, you asked me about my
yes, I want
background.
your connection. Yeah.
It's funny. Like last week, I when we first started talking about doing this, I remember saying over email, Stephen King is Americana. And as it turns out, like with these movies, I keep having like childhood connections to Stephen King. Like last week with the Thanksgiving thing with Salem's Lot, upon watching this, it dawned on me that I actually stayed at the Stanley Hotel in Colorado, which when I was probably about Danny's age, actually, the kid in this movie, and with my family, which is the actual supposedly haunted hotel that Stephen King based The Overlook on. And, I didn't know anything about the connection at the time. My dad mentioned it later on. Maybe he didn't want to scare me, but...
and that's a beautiful hotel. If you look at that hotel on Wikipedia,
it's gorgeous. And serene. It's one of my happiest childhood memories. But when I started talking about doing this with my parents and everything, they talked a lot about it, and I ended up reading up on it. And actually, it's funny. The supposedly quote unquote evil room in the Stanley is room 217. At the time, the Stanley didn't want any negative publicity from this movie, so they made them change the number, and it became room 237. Which is weird because now they you go to the Stanley and they have all stuff about it being the Shining Hotel. I guess a couple of decades made them think that over, but
you got to pay the bills. Hey, look, come stay at this.
And we stayed at a haunted hotel in England. It was awesome.
Maybe
that's true. That was
tell the spirits to come out.
Yeah, but it doesn't
want to do.
The spirits pay no attention to me. If there are spirits out there...
Yeah, Jason called them forth, of course, as he always does. But I'm the one who sort of sent something. He didn't actually get anything.
Yes. Yeah, I just have no luck. I have a feeling that if there are, in fact, spirits, that they just have no interest in performing for me. Because I've been to the Georgian Pilgrims Hotel in Glastonbury. It's like the oldest hotel in all of Europe, and I summoned out the spirits there, and I've been to, that abandoned place in Paris and all up and down the Loire Valley, and I've been to other haunted places, and nope, no luck. So I think I'm going to keep going to places, but I think...
Did you go to St. Francisville with me? I can't remember, in Louisiana.
I don't remember.
That's super
actually.
haunted.
Maybe I've forgotten that whole.
I don't think you did. There's a hotel there that's super haunted, but I didn't go to the hotel.
So what I was going to say, in my first impressions, first of all, Joy and I did have this experience of staying in a hotel that was off season, but we weren't abandoned there because it was just the cold part of the year, and so nobody was at the tennis resort that we were staying at. So it was just us and like the guy that ran the restaurant and his wife. But it was nice and spooky, and that was a lot of fun. That was in the Loire Valley, and this movie, I have really great memories of seeing this movie. I don't remember when I first saw it, but I think the first time I actually really paid any attention to it was I was much older. I was in college, and I was in Munich, and I went to this. I noticed I got off in Munich, there for the weekend, and I realized that they were going to be playing The Shining at this local college. So I went to the college and went to the student union, and I watched The Shining on the big screen. This was in I don't know, sometime in the early 90s. And then while I would have been 91, sorry. And then I got out, and that was a terrible movie to watch by yourself in a student union in some town that you don't really know very well. And so I trudged back to the train station, and it was closed. So I was stuck in Munich all night after having seen The Shining, just sort of walking up and down, and it was freaking cold. So my memories of The Shining are of just numbing pain, but I think it's just fantastic. I agree with you. It is cold as an Edward Hopper painting. It is a very, very. It is an astonishingly clean, cold, sterile, surgical kind of movie. I think Stephen and Jack Nicholson, we're going to get into, is. I think he makes his career here. I know he had been a star before this, but I think this is. I believe that this
is almost this audition tape for Batman.
I think even more than, and let's go straight to Jack Nicholson. I think even more than One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, this movie is where people get their notion of Jack Nicholson the freak, Jack Nicholson the crazy man, because I've seen One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. It's not like this, and everybody now has this notion of Jack Nicholson being, nuts. So.
Well, I mean, there's that "Here's Johnny" shot. When he's poked his head through the door that he's broken open with an axe. And by the way, I just want to add that apparently they originally had put in a door that was like a easy breakaway door for him to cut through, but he was like a fire chief. So he actually knew how to use an axe, so they actually ended up replacing it with a strong door so that he would have some trouble getting through it. But anyway, so then he pokes his head through and he says, "Here's Johnny." And that shot is what you think of when you think of Jack Nicholson. I mean, forever and ever, it is the shot that people will show over and over.
It's been a shot used on the covers of books about horror movies and slideshows.
There's a rock magazine this month that there's a joint tour of Rob Zombie and Marilyn Manson, and it's a riff on this. It's Marilyn Manson done up like Shelley Duvall, and Rob Zombie smashing through a door with an axe.
Oh, that's funny. Okay, so let's go back to the beginning and talk about how we wind up with Jack Nicholson axing his way through the door trying to get to olive oil. So Jack Nicholson plays. He's called Jack, isn't he? Jack Torrance, who is and that didn't sound right at first, and which is funny because Danny is also played by an actor named Danny, but Jack is a writer he's basically, here's his story. He is a recovering alcoholic teacher.
No, not recovering, dry drunk. He's not been in recovery. Right. He just hasn't been drinking.
Jack is a cold turkey, dry drunk alcoholic who has not touched a drop of alcohol in 5 months since he dislocated his little boy's shoulder and promised his wife he wouldn't drink anymore, and he's not a teacher anymore, and it's entirely possible that those things are related. And now he has taken a job that that actually sounds pretty awesome to me, which is that he's going to go up and spend 5 months snowed in at a hotel, and all he really has to do is, tap the boiler and, cycle the heat through the house and do basic maintenance, and he can write a book. Sounds like a fantastic deal, and they tell him in the interview. They tell him in the interview, now it can get cold and lonely, and he's like, sounds fine to me. And they go, and how's your family going to take it? And they'll go, they'll love it. And they say to him in the interview, well, 10 years ago there was a guy who took the job, and he ended up axe murdering his family. And he says, my family loves horror movies. And so they give him the job. and I have to say, this is the first time we see Jack Nicholson's character, and he is clean cut. His hair's slicked back, and he's talking to Barry Nelson, the first James Bond ever on film, and because he by the way played James Bond in Casino Royale in 1954.
And tell the boys what Jack Torrance is reading while he's waiting on for his interview.
Okay. So the second interview, so that's the beginning, and this is the last time we're going to see him clean cut. He and immediately he drives the family out there. I know there's more. We'll talk about the psychic stuff, but he takes the family up to the hotel. They're going to be there for 5 months. Did you guys notice? If you watched the documentary, you probably did, that Jack is reading Playgirl magazine when he is waiting to meet Barry Nelson, his boss.
No.
Playgirl.
Yes.
That's odd.
Actually, he's reading this 1979, because there's an article I found that was explaining what issue of Playgirl Jack is reading, and it's the one that has a big interview with David Soul, who was the star of Salem's Lot, the movie that we just watched last week. I don't know if that's the connection. I don't know if he's reading a Playgirl magazine because Jack Nicholson thought it would be hilarious if he's holding a Playgirl magazine when he meets his new boss. I don't know why he's reading a Playgirl magazine.
As some people have suggested, if he's actually has some sexual deviations that are not completely clear.
Well, it would explain his rage towards his wife.
Mm-hmm.
There would be deviations that wouldn't even be. That would be a gay Jack. I mean, yeah.
Well, but the reason I say deviations because there's actually you were telling me there was a whole thread suggesting that he might even be a pedophile. Sexually abusing his son. So I don't know. That's
Yeah.
I don't think that there's any sexual abuse. I definitely think that there's some, heavily implied physical abuse. But it doesn't seem like that. He just seems contemptuous of his wife, and he seems like if anything, like at the beginning, he's almost an absentee father. And, he never once do I believe that Jack loves his wife and child. Like it just never comes off like that. Like the character in the book is a flawed father and a flawed husband, but there's actually some affection there. Like This character is just kind of an a-hole from the get-go.
He seems really mad, doesn't he? He seems very, very annoyed at them. When he's driving them, this is the first time you see them together. Remember, he never comes back to the apartment. You see them just together. He's driving the family up to the hotel, and he seems so annoyed every time they open their mouths. It was really uncomfortable for me watching this guy because I thought, Jesus, God forbid somebody have to grow up with this dad who cannot hide how annoyed he is that they are there. And maybe that's just
even it just I even wonder about how he even hooked up with Shelley Duvall to begin with, because he just doesn't seem like why. I mean, I guess
I can answer that.
Shelley,
yeah, lay it on us.
I can answer that question. No, I mean, this is a classic, alcoholic enabler. She thinks that she's going to, save him and pick up the pieces of his shattered life and whatever, that as long as she does everything right, he will love her, and that's the constant chase. Is she's always trying to make everything right so that that things will be okay. And it's like that's she's got that rescuer thing going on. And of course he's like, okay, you want to pick up the pieces of my life, fine, go ahead. And that's how he let her in, because she was like, I'll make everything perfect for you, and you won't have to do anything, and you can write and you can drink, and I'll just take care of your life for you. And he's like, that's fine, but of course he's never going to be happy with that because he's an alcoholic, So that's how that goes. But that's just a typical. That's a typical addict or alcoholic and codependent relationship right there.
Well,
I know I keep saying that, but I think
the way
it's
Shelley Duvall plays it.
Yeah.
Also, this is we're seeing them at the, actually we catch them at literally the tail end of this, but we're seeing what I think is the slow burn, right? You don't take a job where you're just going to go out in the middle of nowhere. Luckily it's over the break, but your kid might have school, etc. You don't take that kind of job unless things are just not quite working wherever you're at. He's quit his job. He's quit his job as a teacher. He's no longer doing that, which may or may not be because he abused his kid.
Yeah.
He thinks he's going to get this novel done, but obviously he's not really he hasn't sold a bunch of novels. That we never get the impression that he's.
It might even be
writer.
his first. We really have no clue
and
how
so
much
he's
of a writer
decided
he is.
he's going to do this, and she's enabling him to do not only now the alcohol's over, she's enabling him to go do that too, right? Like, this is great. We'll be great with the family.
I just want to throw this out there while we're talking about the Jack character. Do we feel like this is yet another confessional character?
Oh, absolutely.
Because again, we have a character that is a writer. We all know, anybody that knows even an inkling about Stephen King knows that he has had substance abuse problems in the past.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any doubt there. I don't think anybody would be like, man, that is weird for Stephen King to make a writer alcoholic guy who's had a.
No, but he also said apparently, Jason was telling me that he said that he was working through some rage issues. Like he was actually working through issues about having this rage fantasies about his family even. So it's even autobiographical to that extent. But I will say that one thing we were talking about how you get the creeps from Jack Nicholson from the beginning, and that's actually the reason that Stephen King didn't like Jack Nicholson for this part, was because he wanted someone who you would believe, one of the names he throws, John Voight, somebody who you believe as kind of just a family guy who goes crazy rather than a crazy guy who happens to have a family.
And that is completely valid, and especially if you think that this character is somebody that Stephen King put a lot of his self into. I'm sure he doesn't want to think that he is this unredeemable creep.
Right.
And that's really what Jack Nicholson is. And to Jack Nicholson's credit, he is phenomenal to watch in this movie, and he is absolutely terrifying.
But I felt really bad. I felt guilty about Jack. Isn't that terrible? I know that sounds strange because I'm not Jack. I'm not an alcoholic. I'm not a wife beater or a kid beater. And I was watching this and I felt so guilty that he wasn't getting any writing done. I really, literally, it just drove me insane.
Jason, that is because you were an absolute sweetheart. It's really what it is.
Yeah. Also, by the way, again, he doesn't seem like he didn't think this all the way through, right? He thought, hey, I'll be alone, we'll be alone. I think I can just go off and just not have to deal with this family. And you can tell, the reason I'm saying that is because, you watch him in the car, and that's the first time he's like, yep, okay, here we go.
He's so mad. He's so mad they're talking to him.
I cannot wait till we're there.
Yeah.
Which, it happens on a lot of family vacations.
Well, and then the temper tantrum that he throws. The temper tantrum that he throws when she comes in and he's at the typewriter and he's like, "Don't ever bother me in here. Go away. Leave me the hell alone." It's very clear that he's just like.
Well, he agreed to do this job where he's alone with his family, but he obviously can't stand his family. This hotel did not need to be haunted for. He's
not even doing the job. She's doing the job. She's the one going around doing all the stuff.
Isn't that wild? Yeah, she's bleeding off the boiler and all that stuff. And you're right. He doesn't seem to have thought it through. And like we talked about, this character is not Stephen King, whereas the character in the book really is pretty much Stephen King. He's written some. He knows a lot about what he's doing, and so it's just a matter of, can he live up to his potential if he can just keep it straight and not drink anymore. And that's a real thing that he thinks about all the time in the book. This guy, he may just be a prisoner to his own fantasies that he might be a writer. He might be one of those people who just flits from one sort of, half-assed notion of what his life is supposed to be to another, And you can see it when he starts, when he goes nuts later on, and the thing that he latches onto is that he made a promise to these people, that have you ever stopped to consider what would happen if I didn't live up to my responsibility? And, he's
well, if you feed off the interpretation that there are evil spirits in this hotel, which they flirt with. That's still in.
Yeah, it was built on an old Indian burial ground.
Yeah, and which was actually one of the reasons why Stanley Kubrick wanted to buy the rights to the novels. He loved the idea of a hotel built on Indian burial ground, strangely.
Yeah.
But they flirt with that idea heavily enough, and it seems like if you look at that interpretation, which is valid, these entities are very much playing off Jack's vanity. There's even sometimes where the score sounds like whispering, and you could almost just imagine they are whispering, these things to Jack into his head, do this and you will be great. Do this and we will make you feel all these wonderful things.
Yeah, the moment when Jack, when basically reality really starts coming unmoored, or rather the haunting really starts manifesting itself. And by the way, it is a real haunting. We finally get that. It remains is it or isn't it until the point where the spirits actually unlatch the door and let him out of the lock-in. And then, and when they let him out of the larder, then we know for sure that, yes, there really are some telekinetic creatures around.
Well, Stanley Kubrick was supposedly very troubled by the idea of ghosts. It was not something he had a very easy time wrapping his mind around, which is kind of odd why he would choose to make a movie about a haunted hotel. But that's why it is all very lightly played till the finale.
When Wendy comes to him in the office, which is the thing that Joey was just bringing up. She comes to him and he starts cursing at her, and his cursing is really strong because we haven't heard him curse at all at his wife, and what I was fascinated by is how she takes it, how much she sort of draws up inwardly, when he starts yelling at her, and her head just sort of quivers, and she's like, okay, and it's really stunning. I mean, you really feel as though you feel like you're watching some real abuse going on. I mean, it is abuse. It's just terrible psychological abuse. You're like, this is not a good situation. This is a terrible thing for that kid to be seeing. And I think it's the same thing. I know we're still talking about Jack, but you get a lot of the same stuff when she's basically hanging out with her kid and she's turned this winter hotel into something just like her apartment. They sit around, they watch cartoons, and she smokes cigarettes and reads Catcher in the Rye, which is the book that she's reading when we first meet her. And they, the one thing that she's telling her son is, just don't wake up your father. This is so familiar to anyone, let alone somebody with an abusive father, but just generally life growing up, that he is this presence that hovers over them, and that she can have an ounce or two of happiness if they can just avoid crossing paths with him. Did you guys experiencing any? I know I had great trepidation also when the boy, at that moment, she says, "Don't wake up your father," but he wants to go get his fire truck. I love this. This is
then the dad's just sitting there, on the bed. He's not asleep, and he tells him to come over, and then he tells him like that he loves him and hugs him, but it's like even then you don't believe it's not like a tender. I don't know how it is in the book. I don't know if it's supposed to be a tender moment. It's a creepy ass moment. I mean, he's like saying, do you know that I love you, whenever, and then I mean, he's like, you would never hurt me and Mommy, would you? And he gets mad at him, and you're just like, oh, get away from that guy, kid.
Well, the other thing that's really creepy is he's repeating things that, like, he kind of repeats the phrasing that the twin ghosts say, oh, stay here forever,
ever and ever and ever,
and ever, and it's just like, man, it's so creepy, and it's not like a typical Jack Nicholson performance where he's like really mugging for the camera and seeming psychotic. He's very flat. He looks almost drugged.
Yes. Well, there's another interesting thing about his performance, and one of the reasons why you probably saw the same documentary I did. But, Spielberg says he didn't like this performance. Other directors have said they weren't crazy about Jack's performance in here. And Kubrick had done this thing where he would get like 50 or 60 takes out of his actors, and after, many, many takes, he'd start asking them to experiment. Add something a little crazy, do something weird with your head, do a little bit of that. And the actors would just riff. And then he would use the one that came like number 50 or number 60, and that was very strange. And he would always use these out there choices, and so that's what we are left with is this very strange performance that seems to be made up of extremely out there interpretation.
Well, the only problem with this is that I think, because there's a million from that's interesting, or that's probably happened, kind of conspiracy theories about this movie, to out and out what are you talking about? That's crazy. Stuff that if anybody's ever spent any time on a set, you realize as much as Kubrick was a control freak, you can't control every single thing. He was not a god. He was godlike in his directing abilities. There's no doubt. The man, that body of work of his, amazing, And the shots in here, watching it again, like I said before, so meticulous. The cinematography, every bit is just, there's not a bad scene that I can remember.
Well, there's some amazing, let's talk about the setting a little bit.
Okay. The thing is, you have all these people who, there's just a documentary that played at Fantastic Fest, Room 237. I didn't see it, unfortunately. Now I kind of wish, now that we're covering this, I wish I would have seen that, and the very Dark Side of the Rainbow-esque showing where they superimpose The Shining playing both backwards and forwards on the same screen, which I've heard is a pretty crazy, kind of neat thing to see happen, and that there's all these synchronous moments that are really cool. So
I wonder where you can see Room 237. Is it available on video on demand?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not positive, but I think because of his meticulous nature and how amazing he is, it leads us to believe that there just cannot ever be a mistake. No matter what he does, can't be a mistake. This couldn't have been, a production assistant doing something. Any of the things that happen on a normal set, people, you just read these. I was just looking it up, and you read there's this mistake. Oh no, that was because the hotel wanted them to think that. Or what about this? Oh no, that was part of the unsettling nature. You just don't understand. It's this, no matter what you can come up with, people have said, and, hey, maybe it's true, but to me, I'm sometimes the light is going away and everybody's been working 24/7 and you get a shot, even if he's getting 60 shots instead or whatever. Some things are chance.
Yes. It's entirely possible that Jack, in fact, we hear Kubrick on the documentary say very clearly because he's always being mean to Shelley Duvall, and he says very clearly to her, you know what, the lines don't really matter as long as you're getting the emotion right. And I guarantee you that he probably feels that way about the space as well, that if the emotion is right, he's going to, by God, move a table from one spot to another between two takes if the second take is going to look better. And if it doesn't match up in continuity, I'll bet you he doesn't care. And I just read an entire website all about all these spatial continuity errors in The Shining, suggesting that all of them are deliberate and a subconscious attempt on Kubrick's part to send us a message.
Well, there's also the one that links it all back to, like, ancient alchemy and, like, all kinds of different, like, elements and everything. And I was like, wow, this is a really well thought out. And some of it, like, if you're going to go down that rabbit hole, like, some of it makes sense. But then you're like, man, do you know how deep, like,
yes.
Wow, do you know how much planning on everybody's part on the entire crew? Like, I mean, he's reportedly a taskmaster, but I mean, this would mean this movie alone, much less he's does this for all his movies. This movie alone would take such planning on just to do the extra. I mean, it took planning just to get the film done.
Sure.
It would mean so many sketches that had to be handed out and everything. You can't direct everybody to do that without, copious notes and stuff. I'm just convinced. Like, having
here's
seen
an
all
example.
of that. So I haven't seen a movie being made and talking to people. Like, I haven't made a movie myself, but I just, man, I mean, this thing goes into depth. And I will have to say kudos to the person, Alchemy, the Shining Alchemy guy, because it is an amazing set of, like, laid out. He's got diagrams and everything. I mean, it is impressive. But I just think that we tend to read too much. It's like guys who analyze every Beatles tune down to, like,
yes,
it's just minutia where you're like, you know what? At some point, these were guys, extremely talented guys who were in a band who were just writing music. Like, they weren't analyzing, and then a semitone. They were not prog rock. And they didn't have that in mind, but after the fact, you just get all this insane analysis, and it's fascinating to read. But I think a lot of it's just so overblown, and just you're like, wow, man, I just don't think everything is. The cynic in me says everything is not planned that way, and I think if we.
It does seem unlikely. I think that sometimes there really can be designs that are strictly literally are intended to make you feel ill at ease. I think some of these narrow corridors are intended to make you feel.
Oh no, everything's planned that way. But I think there comes a time when I think that people are just making the movie that they set out to make.
Absolutely, and the fact this guy goes to great pains on one of the sites I showed. Said it is very difficult to figure out how you could walk. From what they've shown us, it's very difficult to figure out how Jack could have gotten around Hallorann spatially, when Hallorann comes through the front door, because from everything else they've shown us in the movie.
That's something I definitely want to talk about like the Hallorann character.
Yes.
Because that's one of the things that actually does bother me about the movie, that they sort of changed.
Okay. So before we get to Hallorann,
let me say something real quick about the setting before we switch to the next character. I just want to say that one of the things I think is really interesting about this movie is the lighting, because, I mean, they even said that they set the set on fire because they had such bright lights that they were trying to make it so light. And it's something that is so different. You were saying, Drew, earlier about, I don't know if you were saying it before the podcast or during, but anyway, about how sterile the movie is. And that's the thing, is like part of it is that bright light, which is so different from because most horror movies, to have that kind of mood lighting, the darker, creepy, sort of spooky, dark light. And this is like bright lights. I mean, even when you have a scary thing like the little ghost twins at the end of the hall, it's all this light, and it just really is unsettling, because you kind of feel like, light means safety, and it's totally
the use of color too is very.
God,
It's very almost Andy Warhol. I mean, you have that bright red men's room, and you have that green bathroom in room 237, and it's very lends this sort of surreal, almost cartoonish cartoonish is not the right word. I just
so let's skip. You just mentioned the bathroom in 237, and let's skip right to Hallorann, and we can fit that in with the hauntedness of the hotel. Let's go back to the beginning. When the family gets there, Hallorann is the cook, and he immediately realizes in a wonderful scene that Danny is psychic, and so he contrives. He's going to give. Well, he doesn't even contrive. He just goes, "Hey, I'm going to give the kids some ice cream," and they go rockin'. And so the cook and the little boy sit down at a table and have some ice cream, and Hallorann takes that opportunity to ask Danny, how psychic he is, and does he know about it, and all this stuff. And God, wasn't this a great performance? I mean, isn't Scatman Crothers just like
one of the most
awesome?
He's perfect.
But he's the warmest thing about the movie too.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Well, and it's just so sad though, because I mean, he goes to all that trouble to come up there and rescue them, and then he doesn't even get to see them before he gets himself killed. I mean,
he does the stupid thing. Like, this is the one point where it becomes a stupid horror movie. Whereas, okay, this guy is psychic. This guy, he is psychic. Yeah. We know he is psychic. Mm-hmm. He walks into a hotel where he knows some bad crap is going down. He knows the hotel is haunted, and he walks in. Hello,
with no
hello. No, you're right, and that is troubling. That it's the only way that I could read that in my. If you want my Marvel No Prize, I'll tell you that the hotel is manifesting in some very, very out there ways, and so it's also dampening Dick's psychic powers as he gets closer to it. So
I think you're giving him too much credit, Chief.
I agree.
Well, I mean, this is the best I can do. This is what the No Prize is about.
In the book,
tell me. I don't remember.
That he is basically the hero of the book, whereas in the movie, he goes through this long journey to get back to the hotel and is killed very unceremoniously, almost immediately when he steps in through the door.
Yeah, it's almost a joke, isn't it? It's kind of it's actually kind of a gag that he gets killed. And that
bothers me. It is the one thing I wish that. I'm not one of those people that feels like when you adapt a book, you have to be slavish to it. Like a filmmaker, especially a filmmaker like Stanley Kubrick, has to bring their own thing to the table. But some things, this is one of the few things that I think it was wrong to change that, because it makes the character basically he becomes the Basil exposition character. He explains what The Shining is, and then he serves. Yeah, he's a joke, and that really does bother me.
Well, his death is a joke. Up until then, he is played as the hero, and then his death is a joke. And I think it's intended to be a harsh joke that's not supposed to be funny. It's supposed to really unnerve us that he walked in and then got killed.
Well, I guess that way Shelley Duvall's character, who up to that point has been kind of weak, does get to finally step up and be the one that saves the day. And I can kind of understand, why you would want to give her that redemptive moment, but it still kind of bothers me.
It's so great, though, to see Scatman here, because I knew Scatman from, I used to watch entirely too much TV when I was a kid, and so I watched
Hong Kong Phooey.
Yeah, well, and Chico and the Man. I watched a lot of Chico and the Man, and Scatman Crothers was a regular on that, and he was sort of everywhere in the 70s. And so here, boy, in the scene, again, the scene where he's, talking to the kid, he really reaches inward. He's really thinking. You can see his eyes moving. This is a good actor, because you can really see him, trying to work his way around how to explain, and also getting outmaneuvered by the kid who asks him, "So you're afraid of stuff?" And I love that scene. It's so great when he's talking to a child, because he says, you need to stay away from that place, and it's really I don't know. It's wonderful. I think the movie would lose a lot without Scatman Crothers in this role. But yes, he finally makes it back, and he gets utterly iced, and that's where Shelley Duvall's character, Shelley and Danny, are really in the end the ones who author their own rescue, other than that they used the vehicle that Scatman drove up. I was amazed at the way that Danny finally wins over his father is that he leads the father into this maze. Now dig this. That maze is actually very hot. It's not cold at all. You're looking at fake snow. You're looking at Jack Nicholson running around in very warm weather conditions. And so all of this is essentially imaginary. It's an illusion. This movie is almost entirely illusion. The hotel itself is not a real hotel. It's all a giant set built on the same sets where they built the Star Wars. This is the Death Star you're looking at. It does not exist. It's amazing to me how much you believe all of this stuff. The hedge, the snow, the set, the lights, everything.
Oh, and by the way, going back to what Julia was saying, it is unnerving and kind of refreshing to see a horror movie completely in light. Even the hedge maze, which should be just super dark, has these bright, just super bright lights all throughout it, which you would need, but to avoid liability if you're actually running a hotel. But wow, yeah. I mean, just to do that, it could have been a really dark scene, but he's got lights everywhere.
Yes.
Not just a little bit of light. Everything is as bright as it can be outside in that snow and fog. It is that bright. And that, again, is one of those, wow, let's take something and just do it, completely turn it on its head, which is
it's wonderful.
Speaking
it looks quite romantic, doesn't it? Go ahead.
What do you guys make of the fact that Jack can apparently see, or at least it looks like he can see them running around the hedge maze earlier in the movie?
That is so cool. That's really neat. Yes, when Jack looks down. Yeah, go ahead.
It's been, mentioned, and I was reading stuff about this online, that perhaps, Jack's character is psychic too and just doesn't realize it. And that's one way to look at that.
I completely believe that he is psychic too. I think Jack is almost as open to all, and that's why he keeps seeing things. I believe that Kubrick has picked up the thesis of the novel that the hotel wants Danny, but now wait. I take that back right away. I'm really sorry. The thesis of the novel is the hotel wants Danny, because Danny's super powerful. But that's not the case here. The hotel in the movie is annoyed with Danny and wants Jack. It really seems to think that Jack is destined to be part of it. So can someone please tell me what the end means? Because I need to know, is that the case?
Shouldn't we go back, before we get to the end, shouldn't we go back through and talk about Danny? Because Danny is a really key character from the beginning. I mean, the fact is, we meet them in the apartment, and we immediately meet Danny's, what you might call a split personality, or his imaginary friend, or his ghost possessing, or whatever it is. He's talking to his mom, and he says his finger is, talks for Tony, and he's got this little funny voice where he says, no, Mrs. Torrance. And it's like, Tony does not want to go to the hotel, and we see Danny talking to Tony and saying, why don't you want to go? And he says, I'm not going to tell you. And he's like, no, tell me. He's like, I'm not going to tell you. And so clearly this psychic side of Danny, or whatever it is this Tony, which is either, like I said, I don't know what you guys think of it, if it's a split personality thing, or if it's he has
dissociative. I think Danny has dissociative identity disorder. I mean, he's a kid. He's coming from an abusive family. That's usually when people with that mental illness usually come from that background.
But it's also
even a lot of the characteristics. Huh?
Yeah. It's also a psychic personality, because he actually knows that that the dad's about to call saying he got the job.
So it's both of those things, because it's a horror movie.
Psychic.
But yeah. He's psychic, and remember in the book, you know what? we're spoiling the heck out of the movie. I'm not going to spoil the book. So never mind. Forget I said anything about
No. We the book, talking about the book in the Stephen King retrospective should be
okay, then, in the book, it is one more thing. So yes, it is a retreat for Danny, and yes, it is the thing that sees the future, just like Dick says, but Tony is not just that. Tony is also the time-traveling psyche of himself.
He's talking to him from the future.
Yeah, he's talking to himself from the future. And it becomes really clear when he appears later on in the book, and he says, "You will survive because you will remember what your father forgot." And that is to bleed off that damn boiler and keep the hotel from exploding. It is it is really shocking. It is such a wonderful shock. And it's also really one of those moments when Stephen King reminds you that he's, really sort of quite the master at neat prose tricks. That's a good moment.
Which reminds me, now I'm like remembering, because one of the key phrases in The Dark Tower is "remember the face of your father." They reiterate that as like, hey, remember what's close to you, remember what's dear to you, remember your ancestors, remember what's important to you. And the fact that comes back, like now that you mention that, like that comes back repeatedly in the Dark Tower, which of course links everything in the King-verse now.
I've never read the Dark Tower series. I know that I must. It just seems like such a commitment, Tony. I mean,
I don't know. I mean, it's a bunch of
It's bigger than Game of Thrones. I mean, the Dark Tower series, it looks to me like something I would need to spend the next year reading.
Let's focus on what we're here for.
Yeah.
Okay, yes. Thank you.
Danny in the novel is different. Like, Danny in the film is, I would say, is a disturbed child.
Right.
And that's, who is also psychic. I don't, for a moment, think that you can interpret this movie you can interpret the haunted hotel stuff different ways. I don't think you can interpret this kid in any other way that he is psychic. But the where was I going with that?
The kid is psychic. The finger is his dissociative personality displacement.
He even talks about Tony living in his mouth and then living in his stomach, which
and disappears down to his stomach.
Well, but that stuff you hear, it is associated with people with that delusion at times. They think this other persona lives in different parts of their body.
Wow, it's really wonderful. I found it really disturbing, but also really heartening that he has this coping mechanism. That he. I know that it's terrible for me to say that this disorder is charming, but it's heartening that he has this means of dealing with the world around him.
It's tough to live with.
Yeah, I have no doubt. So when he gets to the point at the end where he lures his dad into the maze and then does this sort of James Fenimore Cooper trick of like going backwards in his own prints to confuse Jack Nicholson, who has sort of lost a few rational cells along the way.
He's also been, now, don't forget, he's also been whacked in the head with a bat, and his hand's been cut, and he's fallen downstairs. So he has taken a few blows.
Yeah.
But he's also possibly maybe possessed.
Yes.
There's.
He reminded me a lot of.
By the way, I have a theory about that. I think he sold his soul for the beer, for the drink.
This is a new theory.
Well, he
I've
does
never heard
say that.
He's at the bar and he goes, "I would sell my soul for a drink," and then he gets a drink. I think that at that point he is totally in the devil's power.
I am fascinated by that because Stanley Kubrick was more or less an atheist.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one of the reasons why he had a lot of trouble with the supernatural aspects of this material. And yet he keeps that line in there, and the bartender looks very devilish. He's got the red suit with the bow tie and the slick back hair, and all he needs is a goatee and a little horn.
Right.
Isn't that guy great? I love that actor. Is Joe something, and now I've forgotten forgotten the name of the actor, but Joe Turkel. Joe Turkel plays Lloyd the bartender, and it's a very small cast in this hotel. Lloyd the bartender is one of the best because he's so smooth. He has a very slight sense of humor. And
what I like about him is and like you can imagine a devil, he's mostly reactionary.
Yes.
Oh yeah. Or well, like a really good bartender.
And like a bartender, yes.
Is like, oh yeah, sure, the best listener ever, right?
Right.
But what does he say about women? He says he uses actually the most banal cliche.
Can't live with them, can't live without them.
Right. There's no ironic twist on it. He just says it's like he's an alien who just grabs the first familiar comment that he can think of and says. He's wonderful, really wonderful. Lloyd, and then we also meet one other guy in that room, which is Mr. Grady. And Mr. Grady, this is the oh God, what an amazing conversation, because this is when Jack is seeing lots of visions, and he meets Grady, the guy who apparently went crazy and killed his 2 daughters, the same daughters who keep showing up as a ghost in the hotel.
And his wife, who shows up as a ghost in the bathtub. By the way,
is she the bathtub ghost?
Oh yeah, of course. No, that was the creepiest scene when he goes in, when Jack Nicholson goes in and starts making out with the hot naked chick, and then she turns into the deteriorating
zombie hag, basically.
Zombie, yeah.
Yes. I do not. I don't know, Julia. I don't think that the
for sure. It's the only other person that.
In the book, she was an old lady who had a lover who left her, and she committed suicide.
Yeah.
Plus, why would Grady stay in room 237? I mean, there's obviously lots of different ghosts. And,
yes.
I mean, we see the man with the getting it on with the other guy in the bear suit.
The dog. Apparently
we see all the people in the 1920s party. I mean, I have a feeling that this hotel, even though they only really talk about Grady, you get the sense that this hotel is racking up a bit of a body count.
Sure. Right. Okay. Well, it might not be then. I assumed it was her.
Oh, hey, Adam, in the chat room reminds us that the guy who plays Lloyd is also Tyrell in Blade Runner. That is amazing. Right. That did not dawn on me.
He looks completely different in this.
Yeah, when I now think of him going, and you have burned so very, very brightly, Roy. Yes, that is him. Wow.
The Grady character, the conversation with Grady in the bathroom, and that line, "I've been here, I've always been here, just as you have always been here." Yes. That's one of the scariest points in the movie, and nothing really happens. But every time I see that my hair just stands on it.
Well, it sure takes its time, doesn't it? I mean, this is one where Kubrick allows these actors to take really long beats between each line of dialogue.
Well, he takes a long time just to show Grady's face full on, too.
Yes.
It's this build-up, and then when you finally see his face, he has this great, almost, classic horror movie actor type face.
Yes. Yeah. No, he's fantastic. And so there's one other.
But he tells him to kill his family. He's like, I took care of the problem, or whatever he says. Like, I corrected my husband. Like, I corrected my wife and my girls. He's like, and I think maybe you need to correct your family too. So he's the one planting the seed.
It's very strange that at first he denies all of that, and I think he denies it in the same way that the shoeshine guy in Black Like Me denies knowing anything. He seems to be just denying, just to be pleasant.
It's also kind of awesome that the hotel itself, goes between being the main evil and also collecting all these evil bits. So it shows its collection on, it shows its pieces that it's collected all this time. But it's actually controlling how all of that appears. And I think, so you get these ghosts that are, featured, but the hotel is always in control. And I think that's kind of an interesting, The hive mind.
Well, we haven't even mentioned the blood rushing in from the elevator walls and that whole scene. Apparently took a year to get that shot right, to get that scene right, because Stanley Kubrick always thought it looked too much like. It looked too much like.
Well, that was.
What did he say? It looked. He didn't think it looked right. But then they used it in the preview. In the trailers for the movie, even though they weren't allowed to show blood in trailers, he just said it was rusty water so that they could run in the trailers.
That was the record on stage blood used in a movie for a very, very, very long time. It wasn't
a record.
Freddy versus Jason.
Great. I won't be saying that one.
It took Freddy Krueger and Jason Voorhees to one up that movie.
So we have a guest in the chat room, and he brings up the question. He goes, I think it's impossible. This is not exact words, but he goes, I think it's impossible to like this movie if you like the book or if you know the book. And, I think we've struggled with this because I think we're coming to the conclusion that that's not the case, that basically they are two really different things. Now, I don't know if you could make a great movie out of the book, but I actually was one of the people who did enjoy the Stephen King version. I liked the Stephen King miniseries.
It's okay,
other people
but it
didn't.
doesn't have the. It's hard to follow that finesse. It's regardless of what you think of the adaptation.
Tony, go ahead.
Well, regardless of what you think about that adaptation, right? It's a suck. Even if you go it is nothing like the book I enjoyed. For all the reasons we've already listed. Yeah. Following Kubrick, making a TV on a TV budget, no less, even if it's a miniseries budget.
Making a movie, period. Right, and that's a tall order.
You're yourself up. That's rough.
Having said that, what's in there, all the alcoholism stuff and all the internal stuff, and the croquet mallets and all those things, those are there. So I actually was one of those people who enjoyed it. Drew, you were going to say something. Go ahead.
I think just about everybody involved with this podcast obviously admires the novel Dracula. And there's been a ludicrous amount of adaptations of that. And, often the ones I enjoy the most are the ones where the filmmaker has added their own bizarre twists to it. I don't think you have to be slavish to a book. I really don't. Obviously you can kind of try and do what Peter Jackson did with the Tolkien books and just try and throw as much of the book in as humanly possible. And that's valid. But, I would rather somebody just try to take an idea and make a good movie and put their own stamp into it. Unless, of course, it's my work, and in which case they should be slavish to it. But
if the solution gets you to something as good as this, then then I'm fine with it.
Well, I don't know, but just see if the shoe was on the other foot, I can watch this as a Kubrick movie and go, it's awesome, it's amazing, it's okay but then Jason and I have also had a book where they decided to change huge chunks of it. And they said, hey, we're doing this, it's my way or the highway. You can have it not ship, or you can have it ship our way. And we went, I guess, let's ship it that way.
I guess it's going to ship your way.
Really? That wasn't a choice I enjoyed making. I still don't know what's going on in parts of it. But, however...
with that book, since it's in French, I have a hard time telling exactly what their changes mean.
But it looks amazing, and so we're like, well, everybody gets book 2. We've already gotten paid. You've made the thing that you evidently wanted to make, and we still have our screenplay, and we have we have all the characters and stuff. So, what do you do?
Yeah.
But it is
you let it go.
Still really hard. It is rough. If I was Stephen King, would I feel that this masterpiece, on screen is a masterpiece?
No, he actually worked really hard He worked really hard to deny that it was a masterpiece for years and years and years, because he was so. You read his work, he says all the time all these things about books and movies are different, But with this one, he really seems to have taken it very personally. He appears to be very hurt in the way he writes about it, that they took this novel that was so personal to him about a man trying really hard not to drink and becoming a monster and how horrible it is, and they turned it into this really amazing but utterly different picture. And that seems to have, and you know, Stephen King, like all humans, I think probably has a hard time being fair about stuff that you know, that's affects
Stephen King, okay, like Stanley Kubrick, you know, probably always will be a god of cinema. But Stephen King, you know, like, look, like, how many crappy movies have been made based off of Stephen King? But at the end of the day, like, and I hope Stephen King ultimately has come around to this realization. His book is still there, and Stanley Kubrick may be Stanley Kubrick, but Stephen King is still Stephen King. And Stephen King is also, like, he is up there. He is legendary, and he has his critics, but his critics can't really touch him now. He is an institution.
Yeah, no, you're right. He's another Kubrick in a sense. It's really like you're kind of watching two giants on the same level, who therefore, you know, they have the egos that come with that, and
absolutely,
yeah, that's interesting.
And this movie could not exist without Stephen King. Like, at the end of the day, Kubrick could not have. If the novel did not exist, Kubrick would have had nothing to work with. He would have been like, "Man, I really would like to do a gothic horror film."
Yeah.
And he would still probably be. Or maybe we would have gotten Stanley Kubrick's Dracula. Who knows?
Well, I keep wondering what would have happened if we had gotten Stanley Kubrick's The Haunting of Hill House, or Stanley Kubrick's, you know, The Legend of Hell House. You know,
Well, this is definite, and this is, you know, you just talk about two of the other giants of the haunted house genre, and this is arguably, I think, if you're gonna like rate them, this would definitely be at the top. You know, I like The Haunting better than this. But, I mean, you can go back and forth on which movie you like better.
Can I ask you guys a question about this one? Because there's some scenes in this movie that are so iconic. I mean, they're just like every movie after this would aspire to have scenes like this one, like these. One of them is the red rum thing. Is that in the book? Because I'm assuming that, because it seems like it would have to be in the book, the whole thing with Tony going red rum, and he's writing... He writes red rum in
I don't remember the business with the finger being in the book. Like, that's all I really remember.
The finger was not in the book. It seems to me that the concept of red rum was in there, you know, but any one thing becomes very large in the novel, you know,
right, because that's super iconic. The thing with the blood coming out of the elevator is super iconic. The twins, you know, at the end of the hall is super iconic, and then the all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy.
The all work and no play is definitely in the book.
It's so funny. I've literally forgotten the details of the haunting in the novel. Isn't that strange? I remember the emotions, and I remember also the oddball idea of the scary topiary, but I've forgotten. I've forgotten the haunting. I've forgotten what the nature of the haunts are. That is kind of crazy. So I guess I need to go back and read The Shining.
Yeah, I'm just curious because those to me are like things that make this movie so memorable. Are those visual scenes and then the weird, the quirky things? You know, like I said, the all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy.
Yeah, well that.
The all work and no play makes Jack a no boy is definitely in the book. Like it's been a while, but I remember that for certain.
Yeah. You know, that is a really interesting. It's not like me to completely forget the nature of the haunts. So that tells you something, that the haunts themselves are not the key to the success of that book. Because I remember being riveted by that book, and yet
I think the surrealism of cinema really adds something to, you know, with the just sort of bizarre characters that you could pepper in to be ghosts. Like you do have the naked old lady, you do have the fetishistic whatever is going on with the guy in the bear suit. You do have the 1920s party, and it's just like that is the one thing where I say cinema the visual aspect of cinema is very, enables you to do certain things that you can't do in a non-visual medium like a novel. But
likewise, things that you describe in a novel can work very, very well on paper and don't translate as well. I mean, for instance, there's a moment in The Great Gatsby when Gatsby reaches out and tries to grasp, he envisions grasping a light beyond the bay, and it plays well in the novel, but when you see Robert Redford do it in the movie, it seems sort of silly that, we're taking actual screen time watching Robert Redford try to pinch a little light across the bay, and then that's because, the same gags don't work the same on, on paper or on film. So I think that topiary animals on paper sound really creepy and strange and kind of laughy, but kind of, the things that are funny can play scary.
This movie was also made, or really more kind of at the start, but, the 80s, really started a revolution that continued into, like, the 90s and beyond in terms of creature effects.
Yeah.
Well,
and they probably could have done those topiary animals now.
Right.
But I think the Maze is better.
They did. Well, they did it in another movie, in the TV movie.
They did test
the Maze is certainly more psychological.
Well, the Maze plays better to me. The Maze plays better in the movie, and the topiary just is a better book thing. And the topiary looks pretty good in the miniseries, but I still think Kubrick's choice plays better in his film.
Well, like I said, they did test in Kubrick, like, this is not going to look good. So we are not going to have it. He wanted it in, evidently. On multiple accounts are that they did test, and it just wasn't going to work out the way.
Well, I just can't imagine, how you, I guess he wasn't the name he is now. Why couldn't you just get, Rick Baker to do the topiary animal?
Well, even if it's a Rick Baker suit. It's just such a
think about the werewolf.
idea.
Think about the werewolf, an American Werewolf in London. I mean, that thing's amazing.
Yeah, but also think about the tree in Evil Dead, where by no means is it like it works.
Yeah,
for
but that movie
did
not. Evil Dead is Evil Dead, and it did not have the budget that this movie
right.
had.
But my point is that they didn't have the budget in this movie. They were spending it on making it all the rooms and everything look awesome. By the accounts that I've seen, my guess is that they said it's going to cost. This is what you can get for this amount of money, and they were like, "Whoa, you know what? Hedge maze." And there's many decisions that probably went into that. We're only getting to the surface of it. But when you say there's this amount of money that you have, or you can take away this money from the stuff that you're really passionate about, and you make those choices and you go with that. And I think that.
Well, and then I'm not saying that the maze doesn't work. It absolutely works. But I kind of would like to see a third go around on this. Just me as a curious film goer to see something maybe in between the Kubrick version and in between the King version. And
well, it's been about 15 years since the King version, so there's time if somebody else wants to go for it again. 15 years is a good time for a remake.
Christopher Nolan could do a great version of The Shining.
Let's talk about the end.
Yeah,
and then we need to wrap this up.
Uh-huh.
So please help. To me, I don't understand the end. I know it looks to me like the suggestion is, so at the end, Jack gets frozen in the snow and the heroes get away.
Looks like he went on a bender. It's always a weird scene where they show him.
Well, did he go on a bender?
He did.
Yeah, popsicle
but he really
Jack.
looks like he would be beside a toilet. It's always, even since when I saw it the first time, it's a really striking scene because it's just kind of, if I remember correctly, it's kind of cut to it. But you're like, he's just like, it looks kind of like the hamburger guy from You Can't Do That on Television.
Oh my God!
It was something to do with it was something to do with being dirty. What was it?
Barf.
Oh God, what was his?
Barf.
The name of
Barf.
It was Barth.
Yes, Barf. Thank you. Yes.
And it's kind of always it's always struck with me that he's just like,
I thought it was Barth with a TH. Was
No.
it?
Could be. I don't know.
Well, anyway, you're right, though. That he looks like that guy, and he looks kind of frozen. But he looks like if you came near him, he'd go, "Get away from me." Like he's
so
just
he's
resting.
frozen, and it's just like, because in the book they blow up the hotel.
Yes.
The boiler, they have to get out.
And it's this moment of heroism, because if I recall, the father snaps out of it and helps them escape, but he gets destroyed. But so yeah, Jack gets frozen, and then remember they've kept giving us these things about how Jack's the caretaker. He's always been the caretaker, and now we close out with an image of Jack in posing as some people pointed out in the pose of the demon Baphomet with one arm up and one arm down in this July 4th photograph from 1921 on the wall. And
Which
so we were left
isn't even in the hotel. That picture does not take place in the hotel.
Well, that may be true, but it's labeled the hotel. So we can assume, I think, that even if Kubrick shot it somewhere else, it's assumed to be a party in this hotel.
It's supposed to be in the ballroom.
So what is this? Okay, here are the possibilities. The picture was always there, but nobody noticed it, which is possible. The picture, he was not always in that picture, but now he's been absorbed into the world of the hotel, and so he's become a character in the past or in the hauntings. But those are the only two I can think of.
The one I always go with that feels right to me is that it did actually absorb him. Like, it basically, he became part of that photograph. Like, he's the new addition to the hotel. And
that's what I go
since
for.
He's always been, the hotel rewrites it so that now he's always part of the hotel.
The hotel rewrites its history. I think that's good.
On, like, that's his fate. And that's a very ghost story kind of thing to have happen. To me, that always works, less so than he's been reincarnated over and over. Because, somebody who hired somebody would have noticed, like, wow, man, that is weird that our new caretaker, and nobody else looks exactly like that. I just keep feeling like he is now part of the past, present, and future of the Overlook Hotel once he loses his fight with both sanity and the ghost and his own demons. Like, that's just
Kane mentions in the chat room he interprets it as the guy passing over into sort of the dimension of the hotel.
Yeah.
I like the way you said it, Tony, that he's absorbed into the reality of the hotel.
Well, he's in a hell of his own making.
Yes, well said. And people who enter the hotel enter that hell as well.
Because there's a whole awesome
really fantastic
part where everything changes. They're showing all these scenes, and there's, one thing nobody mentions. I mean, you almost are unnerved enough by the end to wonder, did he ever meet anybody real? Or is the hotel is it all the girls leaving everybody? Is that the hotel? Obviously they're not, because, Scatman Crothers.
You just gave me complete chills, man.
But
that's really scary.
They show the whole ballroom where it's just filled with skeletal remains of all the people one would assume from that photo.
What if he never brought his family in the first place? That's an interesting idea. I got to go rewatch it and see if Miss Nelson ever said anything to Shelley Duvall, to Barry Nelson. Sorry, but surely he did. I know Barry Nelson said something.
No, I know, but it's another one of those things where, like, the hotel is an entity, and it kind of does what it wants, and so because once it starts showing all these pieces, and there is a scene where it's just the skeletal remains of an entire ballroom scene, which is that was
amazing. I was amazed by that. I didn't expect it to show up. Okay, we need to get final thoughts, and also I'd love to get your endorsements, because we have gone on so long about The Shining that we have nearly talked as long as the actual movie itself, and it is not a short movie. So
it's another hour. It's pretty long.
Let's try to do. Well, yeah, we could keep going. I guarantee you, we could keep going. But but we should wrap. So let's try to do your final thoughts fairly quickly, because we've talked certainly at length. So give me like a 30-second version of your final thoughts, and then I want your endorsements. So we'll go same order. It was Julia, Tony, Drew, and then I'll go.
And so you don't want the endorsements yet? You want them after?
Ow, you hurt my head. Let me see.
I think we decided yes.
That's how we did it last week.
Yes. Let's stick with that. Yes. Wait, what? What did we do last week? We did the final thoughts.
We did the endorsements after.
Okay. All right, then that's what we're going to do. New rule from last week. We're going to do all the final thoughts and then the endorsements.
Which is the same as the previous rule from weeks ago.
Hey guys, listeners, this is what we're going to cut this out in post.
Yeah. There's no post. You guys get the raw deal right
post.
here.
We're live to tape. This is actually happening. Okay, Julia, final thoughts.
Well, okay, so I just think that the brilliance of this movie is so many dimensions. I mean, it's just such a classic film because, like I said, it's got the iconic visuals and then the awesome little script pieces and then the amazing performances, but then also this, like, personal, I mean, even the personal relationships are so interesting with the whole alcoholism, codependency, child abuse, all that interplay, and then the Scatman Crothers coming up. So I mean, I just think there are not enough good things I could say about this movie, except that it's just really scary. And if you don't like scary movies, then I guess it's not good. But I mean, it's brilliant.
Wonderful. All right. It was Tony. Final thoughts.
Beautiful film altogether. You must be doing something right if you can make people devote books, websites, and whole documentaries to your film, making mini films about that film. Like you've done something that really resonates with people. Maybe not as much with Stephen King, and again, it could be one of those. It could have had no supernatural. It could have been a more personal movie about an alcoholic and his dealing with, being isolated with his family. Luckily, it isn't that, and it became this, horror icon of a movie, despite the horror not being the same as in the King novel. I still think it's awesome. Would I think that if I was King? Maybe not. Maybe I would think the same thing he does. But often imitated. I mean, there's so many scenes, and it also gave us the shinning from The Simpsons.
That was going to be my endorsement. That's why I asked if we should do do endorsements.
You can still do it.
But so there's, I mean, and it's still every time you see it, like this is. I didn't get the Blu-ray yet. Like I ended up watching it on Instant and renting it. Now I'm kind of sad that I just didn't fork over the money and get it on Blu-ray because every time I see it, I realize how amazing it looks and just how many bits are there. Just
the Blu-ray. We did watch the Blu-ray and it's wonderful. Okay, all right. Drew, final thoughts. The Shining.
Well, this is a beautiful film. If you're wanting a good Halloween chill, this is a good ghost story. And I do agree with what Jason said earlier, that this is definitely a career standard for Jack Nicholson, because, I mean, you see so many things that, that you see bits of the Devil and the Witches of Eastwick, you see bits of the Joker from Batman, you see all these things that from other famous roles that Jack Nicholson played in this one character. And I mean, this is a great film, and I mean, we've debated back and forth about its merits and flaws, but I mean, at the end of the day, this is a classic.
Outstanding. My final thought, I would add almost nothing to that other than this. There's a lot of movies that we've watched, like, I don't know, Lust for a Vampire, that you could probably live your whole life and you would not miss much by not watching it, but unless you're me. But this movie is a good movie that you must see, especially if you are, if you enjoy being scared. This is a great movie to introduce to your friends if they haven't seen enough horror movies. So I really love this. I think it's well made. I think it's very mature in a good way, and I thought it was fantastic. So endorsements. Let's go backwards. One thing I want to point out is I just got my hands today on a thing called Jaws, Memories from Martha's Vineyard, which is a gigantic 320-page coffee table book about the making of Jaws, and it's basically it's a scrapbook of memories and interviews and photographs from the making of one of the finest horror movies, which hopefully we can get to eventually because it's so well made. So that was really cool. And also I've been rereading Stephen King's On Writing because every time I'm working on a new book, I always sort of spend my off time reading Stephen King's book about writing novels, which is always very helpful to me. So I love it, and I recommend it. I use it all the time. So, Drew, endorsements for us?
Well, I have several endorsements, two of them that are personal. First of all, please go buy Indie Planet Digital. I have a bunch of Halloween Man digital download comics available there. Right now you can get Halloween Man versus the Invisible Man, which is, from what everybody tells me, what everybody tells me, the best thing that I have ever written. I will offer no personal opinion on that. But it is available for free until the end of the Halloween season. Everything else is very reasonably priced, from $1.99 up to $1.50. I also wanted to plug on Halloween from 2 o'clock in the afternoon to 6:30 in the evening, Tony and I will be signing comics at Tribe Comics and Games here in Austin. And if you listen to the podcast here in the Austin area, please come by, say hi. We would love to see some of the people who listen to this face to face. My endorsement that is non-self-serving, I want to endorse Avengers: Earth's Mightiest Heroes Volume 5, Secret Invasion. It's the DVD of the new Avengers cartoon. It's the first DVD from their second, theoretically final season. I don't know. Supposedly they are transitioning it into a new cartoon, but it's got different people working on it, so we will see if it is any good. But if you are a Marvel Comics fan or just a fan of the Marvel characters from the films, please come get this DVD, get the DVDs of that all precede it. It's very, very charming, and it has the classic Marvel Comics vibe. It's even though it does have elements of the film universe in it, it very much draws from like the history of Marvel Comics, going all the way back to the 1940s through the wonderful Silver Age comics of Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, and even into like present day stuff like Civil War and Avengers Disassembled and things like that. And if you're a comic book fan, you certainly will get a lot out of that. But even if you are not, you just like the Avengers from the films, you will still get a lot of enjoyment. And I should point out, this is actually my favorite incarnation of the Avengers in any different media. Like, I like this more than the film. I like this more than most of the comics. I just get a lot of enjoyment out of it, and I watch these cartoons over and over again, probably way more than a grown man should.
Wow, I think you endorsed that with more enthusiasm than anything you've ever endorsed. I love really great.
I love this cartoon.
Okay,
I really
fair enough. I think that sounds outstanding. And by the way, I do know that there is a new Avengers coming. It's called The New Avengers, and I think it's a sequel to the series you're talking about. So we'll
they have big boots to fill.
All right, outstanding. We had Tony already went, right? Or no?
For endorsements?
Yes.
No. Let's see. Well, also, yes, definitely come and see Drew and I on Halloween. Yes. That's going to be awesome. We've only done a couple signings together, so this is really cool. Also, my J-Rock, Japanese rock cover band, Pocari Shred, is playing at Headhunters directly after that here in Austin at 8 o'clock. So I got to scoot over there to play a show on Halloween. That should be really super fun. There's a lot of good bands playing all kinds of genres, but it's going to be a pretty cool show. And then my other endorsement would be, and I need to put the link up on the site, but Kodansha, the Japanese publisher, is on their website. They've just started. I'm pretty sure it's Kodansha. Oh, geez, now I'm drawing a blank. I'm pretty sure it's them, has put up their Cyborg 009 and Cicada graphic novels, and they're going to be releasing more, and I'm really psyched about that. Tokyo Pop previously released Cyborg 009. It's awesome, kind of old school. I think some of the portrayals, especially, there's one black character that it is unfortunate that the artist chose to.
When you sigh deeply after you say, well, there's this one black character, and then you go... That's a lot of times a deal breaker with this older show. They're actually redoing Cyborg 009, brand new animation, everything like anime. But I think there's a definitely historical element to, I think a lot of people looking through it will be like, what? The what? Even though the character itself is really cool, there's nothing there. It's just his portrayal, his, Shinomori's drawings. You're like, wow, this is a really hard sell, not being in Japan in the 60s, Right.
But right. I think that Cyborg 009 especially was one of the first I'd seen his drawings of 009 in a Marvel Epic illustrated magazine, and it really was like, wow, this is a different style. This is really cool. This stuff comes from Japan. This is awesome, and really kind of put me on my path to wanting to, read manga and draw write Psycom and stuff like that. But even more so, I think Cyborg 009, I reviewed it actually before on my own column, but it's strange because the stuff that's in it, like there's Korean War, if I'm not mistaken, maybe Vietnam War kind of commentary on the nature of war profiteering, and it just hasn't even really changed. And you're like, wow, I wish that something from the 60s didn't feel like we're redoing this. So it's still extremely relevant. But I was really psyched when I heard that it's coming back because the Tokyo Pop books are well out of print. And even though I prefer hard copies to digital, the fact that I'm just hoping they get, because there was like a couple of different arcs, and I'm hoping that they continue the arcs that I don't have out of both interest and just purely selfish. I want to see this completed. So, but I'll post a link. Sorry to get long-winded about manga, but I'm pretty psyched.
Outstanding, though. And while you were talking, I actually that reminded me how much I love Goku Midnight Eye, and so I went and downloaded some of that. So,
always good.
All right, Julia, before we geek out on manga, endorse us, will you?
Too late.
Okay.
Too late.
I just, like I said, I just wanted to endorse the Simpsons Treehouse of Horror, specifically the one with the shinning, because that was one of the most awesome Simpsons, segments or whatever you want to call it ever. Well, I mean, there's just pretty much every Treehouse of Horror has just some fantastic stuff, not the least of which is the Raven. But anyway, the shinning has my favorite thing about Shinning is that she goes to look at his typewriter and it says "I'm fine," but then the lightning or whatever shows that the walls are completely covered with no beer, no TV, make Homer go crazy. And I use that all the time. That's one of my favorite things. Like whenever I'm just freaking out because I haven't had chocolate or TV or something, I'll be like, no chocolate and no TV, make Julia go crazy. And then he's got at the end, he's outside. They're all outside frozen. And he's going, they all outside frozen, and he's like, urge to kill rising. And then because the TV is going out, but then they have the little handheld TV, and then they managed to make it work, and he goes, urge to kill fading. I totally relate to that. TV is just so you're just kind of oh. Anyway, it's just a fantastic show. So I encourage everyone to find a way to watch that.
This has been a mega set episode. I think this may very well be our longest episode ever, but by gum, it's because of the freaking Shining. So I'm so thrilled that we had a chance to discuss this. If you are listening to us, if this is not your first time to listen to us, then your challenge is to send somebody else that you know to our show on iTunes or on TalkShoe or wherever. Just send them a link. Send it to them. Like it. Review it. Join us on Facebook. Leave us questions. and we will gladly answer them. I am so thrilled, and we're getting more and more people every week, and I want to grow. Okay, thanks a lot. We will be back with the Stephen King retrospective next week, and I don't even know yet what movie we're going to watch, but we'll find out soon.
I will sadly not be here because I'll be watching The Thing with Wilford Brimley.
Wilford Brimley in person.
We'll be fighting diabetes with Wilford Brimley.
Although we've all been clearly instructed not to say diabetes at any point.
Why? Oh, I don't even want to get into it. You can explain it to me later. All right. And, that sounds like a wonderful event, and I would love to see But while you're seeing Wilford Brimley and not getting any older and not ever dying, we will be watching something with Stephen King. I don't even remember what right now. So have a fantastic week, everybody, and we will talk to you soon. Bye.
Good night.
Bye. Night.